Luxury apartment building pauses in pandemic. April 8th, 2020. A luxury apartment complex has been under heavy construction across the street from my home or rather the apartment building that I live in Mountain View, California, since the shelter-in-place order was first issued in mid-March. And that has continued since the more restrictive, or at least explicitly restrictive, shelter-in-place order was issued March 31st, becoming effective April 1st. And remarkably, this sort of situation has been going on all over, at least Palo Alto, for example. I believe that this apartment complex under construction is in Palo Alto. We're really, really close to the border. The street shown here is usually the border between Mountain View and Palo Alto. Nonetheless, despite the pandemic and all the concerns about it, for some reason, this project was allowed to continue, as have been many other construction projects that are clearly, by any reasonable definition, not essential. They're definitely things we can close down for at least a few months. We can live without them and have large teams of manual laborers working on them. Now, thankfully, the project seems to have shifted from full-scale construction to being mothballed. There was much less activity on Monday this week. I would say a lot less noise, a lot fewer people, but they were still doing something. I'm guessing it was mothballing. There was very little activity yesterday. I saw a couple of people early in the morning, and today it appears to be completely shut down. And so I'm very thankful for that. I'm thankful for whoever made the decision to do this. This is the common sense decision in such a difficult situation. I certainly hope the project will be resumed as soon as possible for the people working there and for, of course, the company and everyone else involved. But I do thank whoever made that decision. It's the right decision. It's the moral decision, and it could save lives. Depends on how serious the coronavirus truly is. So thank you very much, and I will continue, of course, to watch it. And if the circumstances change and it gets re-engaged in the future, unless unwisely, then of course I would still complain about it. So this brings us to a rather important question. Are manual laborers immune to COVID-19? Of course not. Manual laborers are just like everybody else, and they work closely to one another with their hands and so forth, so they are prone to being exposed to the disease and to dying from it just like everybody else, and spreading it to all sorts of other people. And manual laborers are employed all over the world, all over the Silicon Valley, all over here in Mountain View and Palo Alto, and they're needed and they're important, and they cannot function for very long without pay, without jobs. Certainly no more than a couple of months. Probably some are already experiencing significant difficulties. Astonishingly, there are many auto mechanics, many other kinds of people out who do manual labor jobs in this area who are still working. And I'm not advocating unemployment. I'm simply saying they are at risk both to themselves and to everybody else. And indeed, there are strikes going on and protests by many laborers who do physical work. They can't, use Zoom or other video conferencing systems to do their job. They have to physically do things, physically interact with the customers, with the public, for example, at Safeway and other grocery stores. One might ask why there are policies which allow obviously very risky situations like the one across the street from me have been going on since the shelter in place and since the emergency was declared. If the disease is as deadly as has been claimed, and we don't really know that, we don't know how deadly it is, but if it is that deadly, then all of these projects and activities, most of them should have been closed down or severely curtailed, involving manual laborers, at least for a few weeks, some time ago, but you don't actually see that. So I think we should all think about that. What do I think we should do? In the absence of knowledge and data, there is fear. In the absence of knowledge and data, we can't really decide what is appropriate to do. What we need is actual data. We need to know the actual mortality rate of the disease, broken down by age, by sex, by race, by medical conditions that we can quickly measure, including things like obesity, size, weight, other factors, pre-existing health conditions, and so on. So we know what the risks actually are, who is at risk, Secondly, we need to know the rates and modes of transmission of the disease, the organism. We also need to know the false positive and false negative rates under various conditions of the tests used. We hear a lot about tests, but there's a lot of complications. There are tests for an active infection, which is what most of the tests currently are, which does not answer some important questions. There are PCR tests, which are a molecular biology DNA test, and x-rays of the lungs, probably many other things. I'm certainly not a molecular biologist or a medical doctor. I don't know what all these tests are. We do need to know how often they are false positive, which means they report an infection by the coronavirus and there is not one. We could have a complete debacle if these tests have a high false positive rate and are identifying the common cold or other common diseases as the coronavirus. They also will have a false negative rate, meaning that they falsely say you're not infected. We need to know the same for tests for past infection. People who have completely recovered, they will no longer test positive for an active infection. We don't have any of this right now. A few things are coming online. So these are antibody tests and other types of tests. They also will have a false positive and false negative rate. These significantly affect what we observe. In the absence of these kinds of measurements, we don't really know what's going on. People are panicking. They are experiencing the fight or flight response. We all are experiencing the fight or flight response. The fight or flight response is necessary for our survival. It's a quick reaction in a life-threatening situation, a perceived life-threatening situation, such as an automobile accident or tripping and falling, something where you need to respond quickly. We have these responses from thousands of years ago, and we still need them today. They lead to irrational behavior, panic, and so forth in the longer term. If the fight or flight response is triggered in a situation where it is not warranted, where there's actually a longer term, more complicated situation that requires deep abstract thought, higher cognitive function, the fight or flight response makes us stupider. It causes us to do bad things that harm us and other people. So it's important to calm down and get these numbers analyzed quickly and efficiently and carefully, not in a panic. Keep in mind, all of this response is improvised. We don't know most of these things. We don't have good tests. All the tests are being rushed out because it's perceived as an emergency situation. That means mistakes are almost certain to occur, which can have profoundly negative consequences. It's important to calm down, to think clearly, to set aside preconceived ideas and political allegiances. And the thing that is most important for us all is to get these actual numbers, to understand them and their implications. The best way to do that, given the political environment, is through multiple independent teams so we can see an open, transparent process where the actual data is published on the web or the internet so everyone can look at it. The actual analyses are published, again, on the internet, on the web, so everyone can review it and trust what's being done. To have multiple independent teams that are not affiliated. I mean, some can be affiliated with different groups, with different political persuasions, so we can all agree on the actual facts and move forward. We don't have any of this. None of this is in present right now. This is a reaction to an emergency, like slamming the brakes in an automobile accident. We need more than that. If we don't have that, we may greatly overreact. And we've been through two sort of worldwide hyper crises in the last 20 years. The September 11 attacks, those led to a massive overreaction, which has cost us dearly, resulted in invasions, the loss of many lives, and the disruption of the global energy markets, the huge cost. Similarly, there were overreactions and panic to the global financial crisis, the housing bubble collapse in 2008. Again, people got panicked and they reacted on instincts. And further, we know from these two previous cases of a global crisis that various interest groups will move in to exploit the panic and stampede people into making bad decisions that happen to benefit them. They will not act like altruistic team players, even though they will chant the rhetoric of being a team player and a good citizen and social cohesion and other terminology. This is being compounded by our 24/7 social media, internet news cycle. Everyone now, or a very large percentage, and almost all major decision makers, the wealthy, the powerful, everybody has YouTube. They have a lightweight laptop or smartphone, or often both. And so they're exposed 24/7 to fear promotion from the mass media, from CNN, from Fox News, from many different sources, Facebook, YouTube, and so on, which is putting people into this fight or flight mode continuously, including leaders. So people need to calm down. They need to control their exposure to the fear promotion, focus on actual data, actual information that's useful. That information is right here on this slide. We need to determine the actual mortality rate, broken down by age, by sex, by medical conditions, obesity, and so forth. We need to determine the rates of transmission, again, broken down by various factors, such as types of communication, physical communication, jobs, all that kind of thing. We need to determine clearly the modes of transmission and how likely they are and under what circumstances those modes occur. We need to determine the false positive and false negative rates for tests for active infection, tests for past infection, etc. And there are some other parameters and characteristics that I don't want to go into in such a short presentation, but those things need to be collected and decisions made based on solid measurements. Those measurements should be open and transparent in a way which will satisfy critics across the political spectrum from different groups that have different concerns. That's what needs to be done. So those people who may have made the decision to stop the apartment complex project, again, I want to thank those people for making that decision and urge them to focus on the actual data and getting these numbers in an open and transparent way. And I hope the project will resume as soon as possible for the people that work there and people who want to live in a better apartment and so on. That concludes this video, which was produced on Wednesday, April 8th, 2020. If you like this video, please take a moment to click like. Please click subscribe and the notification bell if you would like to receive more content from us. We welcome constructive feedback and comments. Mathematical software is developing products and services to automate data analysis, reducing the risks of costly errors and improving results. If you want to support our work, you can subscribe on our Patreon page. This is the URL for our Patreon page. Scan the QR code in the lower right corner with your smartphone to get the Patreon link. Our Patreon link is also in the show notes below.